It might be the dog days of summer, but there's still some big Major League Rugby news coming down the pipeline this offseason that could have a huge fantasy rugby impact. The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 29 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers community members. And thank you so much to everyone else tagging along on this journey of trying to make fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. As always, I am Ryan Yee, and with me, Matt Yee, Devin Vanderpool. Guys, it's been a minute since we've all been on the show together. How are you guys doing?
It's been a hot minute, buddy. But I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Vandy, you sound fresh.
Yeah, you know what?
What did you change?
You know what? I had to say the same thing to you, Matt. It just sounds crisp.
My gosh.
It's just crisp.
Are you guys in and out?
Did you happen to pick up one of these?
Oh, wait. Did you happen to pick up one of these?
Holy!
Hey,
be careful with that bad boy.
Whoa.
For those of you listening on the podcast, the budget has gone up for the Fantasy Ruckers, and we've got ourselves a couple microphones added to the equipment list of the podcast. So hopefully,
and just for those of you listening on the podcast, just remember mine's bigger than Vandy's. So,
because size always matters, right? It's not how you use it.
It's not how you.
they tell me.
It's not how big it is. It's how you use it.
No, see, you even almost had it backwards there. Come on, buddy. You know the truth.
Well, hopefully we sound better for you guys, and it's just another step into making this thing a bigger thing and growing fantasy rugby. We absolutely have had a blast over the past 28 episodes. We are now on episode number 29.
29?
Which is crazy. And like I mentioned at the top of the show, we are in the dog days of summer. It's getting hot all around the U.S. here. I don't know if it's as hot up there, Vandy, but it does feel like it is the full
really
swing of summertime. It does mean that we are in the midst of an off season in the MLR, but it definitely has not been short of exciting news that has come down, at least in the past week or so, that we're going to break down all this episode. And it's going to have some pretty big fantasy implications. So that's what this episode is all about. It's all about catching up on the news, getting Matt's reaction, getting Vandy's reaction on what has come down that news wire in the MLR. And we're going to break that all down this episode, from roster moves to front office changes to something I definitely know that Matt wants to talk about. A certain someone that has had to step down from a pretty significant position that may have implications on a couple teams in the MLR, but we're going to break that down. Before we get into it, though, I got to say, every single episode, make sure you're following us at the Fantasy Ruckers. That's where you're going to get all the latest information on fantasy rugby in the MLR, as well as you'll be first to know if we ever expand this thing to more people, open it up to more leagues. That's where you're going to find out. So make sure you're following us at the Fantasy Ruckers, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and also on YouTube as well. You can find us there. Subscribe, like, leave us a comment. We love opening up the conversation about fantasy rugby. It's only going to help grow this thing. And hey, if that's not enough for you, right? You can go onto our Discord channel too and have even a bigger conversation with some of the people that are already on there. You'll find the link for that to join in the description below. So make sure, you're staying in tune with the Fantasy Ruckers community, because that's how fantasy rugby is going to actually become a reality in the MLR. Got one more housekeeping thing to say, though. We had a birthday this past week, and we couldn't say anything last episode because he wasn't here. But Vandy, turn in the big 28, buddy, right? That past Thursday. Dude, happy birthday, man.
28th on the 28th, boys. They call it the champagne.
Late champagne birthday. There we go. Right. That's awesome, man. Hope you had a blast with the family. Had a blast with Louie, the kid, on your birthday, and all that good stuff, man.
We had another birthday.
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
We had another birthday, and it just so happened the commish turned 27.
There we go.
1 year younger, but a couple years smarter, buddy.
I wouldn't say
that. Man, just come on, but hey, happy birthday, man. From us here at the Fantasy Ruckers, I appreciate you giving the birthday shout out to me as well. I'm sure everyone would love giving you all the best wishes on that big day. So just had to get that.
I appreciate that. Hey,
no problem.
I'll have a beer with you right now.
Let's have a Gillies to that, boys.
Gillies to that.
Let's have a Gillies to that.
I do think that the ultimate birthday wish for Vandy is the thing that he's been preaching since the start of that we've started this whole thing is getting a beer sponsor onto this show. Crack open that beer, Vandy, celebrate that belated birthday celebration. Hey, maybe a beer sponsor is in the cards.
Unfortunately, it looks like the old Gillies are out the window because they're not going to be a business.
Hey, Matt, we're
sorry. Hold on. To segue perfectly, Vandy, what you really wanted for your birthday and what you got was a hooker. And boy, did the Utah Warriors and yourself ever get a hooker this past week.
You know what? Talk about a really good segue. Matt, I don't think I could have done it any better myself, man.
Matt, that was incredibly.
You know what? I was brewing that up.
I was going to say, you did not just cook that up on the spot because that was really well done.
Right. As soon as we sent out the rundown in preparation of this episode, Matt was already cooking up what he was going to say with that. So no, fantastic segue. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a different episode, a different type of episode today. Matt mentioned it. We're going to basically break down all the news. It's been a while since Matt, Vandy, and myself have all been on the show at once, and there's a lot of reaction to the news that has come down that we need to give our opinions about. So we're going to break that all down this episode and talk about the fantasy implications that these things have, because definitely with the thing that Matt alluded to right there and many more different moves, there's definitely going to be implications for the upcoming fantasy rugby season. So that being said, I mean, you started it off, Matt.
That was money.
Why don't you take my job, Matt? We'll get into the news and notes here. We're going to start with the roster moves that have happened over the past week or so. Matt, it's not my job anymore. Why don't you announce it, dude?
Yeah, king of the one-liners.
Look, that's the only one that I got for you. I'm waiting for you to present the rest, but
you sure you don't want to? You can host the rest of the show, man.
No. Look, I've got a few in my pocket, but that's all I got. Once the pockets are empty, I'm out.
You're like
Dane. All up to you.
Hey, you're like Dane Cook. You had one good special, eh?
I got one good special about Burger King, and that's all you get.
All right. Well, why don't you tell me, Matt, what's on the table here with that special hooker going to Vandy's team of his?
Oh, look. So I guess the hooker wanted to get as far physically away from Vandy. So he got traded from the Toronto Arrows, but closer to Vandy's heart, to the Utah Warriors for a 2023 international selection or spot, whatever they call it.
What is that?
I'm going to say, they get one more. Toronto Arrows get one more spot. So you get a set number of international players on your team because obviously they want to grow the game domestically. So they want you to have domestic players. Toronto gets one extra international player spot.
I got you.
And
for 1 year, right?
For 1 year.
It's like a loan? Okay, I got you.
And frankly, Andrew Quattrin's worth more than that.
Hey,
That's my first reaction.
I was pretty hyped when I seen that, man. That guy seemed like a pivotal piece to Toronto. The guy was balling out all year. It's a great replacement for Chad, who just retired. So, I can't be happier as a fan. Brand new coach, too, Cooper, and he seems like a pretty stand-up guy, too. So, pretty exciting offseason so far for the boys.
I wonder if the coach came in. Cooper came in and said,
"That's right.
I want first up. You're getting me the man of the year, Andrew Quattrin. I want the Quattro hooker on my team now." And that's
he just makes a call. He's like, he's on his way.
Let me lay it out all for the listeners. So Matt is exactly right there. On July 29th, the Utah Warriors received the playing rights for Andrew Quattrin in exchange for an additional international slot in 2023 that will go towards the Toronto Arrows. And you guys kind of all teased it there already. There is a lot of fantasy implication that goes into this. It might not seem like it, but there's a lot of waves that go through. So let's talk about, the Utah Warriors, right, Vandy? You mentioned it. a good replacement for the now retired Chad Go. You guys needed to replace that spot. He ended the season there, basically starting at that hooker position the 5 weeks straight towards the end of the season. He was obviously the guy there that was for you. You now have found that replacement. You mentioned it. I mean, Quattrin was huge for the Toronto Arrows when he was on the field. A big part of that set piece that they had. I'm just trying to pull up his fantasy points here. So Go, in comparison, finished 136th overall in the fantasy MLR rankings with a total of 22.9 fantasy points. He did have a majority of his games at that hooker position, but he did play the tight head, I believe the tight head position occasionally there, but it looks like he will be taking up the full, he subbed in at that front row position, playing at hooker as well, and it looks like that Quattrin will now be replacing that fantasy output. So 22.9 fantasy points for Chad Go, and then you look at what Quattrin was able to do this past season, and I'm just pulling it up here. Hold on, give me a second here.
Well, I mean,
183rd, 16.4 fantasy points, but I think those did come in spurts here. He wasn't the try scorer that Jackman Rogers was, but I do think that fantasy output doesn't necessarily reflect the actual impact that Quattrin has on the field.
No, I'd have to agree.
I mean, the only thing that I'm going to say fantasy-wise is whatever about last season, but this upcoming season, Jackman Rogers' stock went up. Andrew Quattrin's stock went up. Jackman Rogers, I mean, frankly, we didn't see any other backup hooker outside of Quattrin and Jackman Rogers. So, really, I mean, Jackman Rogers is going to play a guaranteed 60 every match, maybe 70. I mean, he has the ability to go longer, right? He's one of those hookers that probably can, knowing the guy. And Quattrin, I mean, he's no longer splitting time with McRogers. He's going over to the Warriors. I think they have Vuga. I forget who your backup hooker is.
Tuver Vugakoto. Yeah.
And I mean, look, Quattrin deserves to be a starter in this league. So he's a no-brainer to start. Those boys are both, their stocks have just gone up in the draft.
Yeah, and it's pretty crazy too to think about. I mean, Quattrin, he made 16 total appearances over the season, starting 13 of those, which is pretty crazy. He was only able to score about 3 tries, but I think, you know, with the way that Utah really utilizes that pack, maybe they'll be able to give that additional boost to the Warriors. But and Matt, you alluded to it, what is shocking for me is what is going to happen with Jackman Rogers, because Jackman Rogers he appeared in 14 matches. He only started in 3 of those, and he scored 6 tries. He was the Toronto Arrows try leader for that team. So you can't extrapolate that out and say he's going to go absolutely bonkers with that. No. But he has the opportunity now to be that starter. He's going to get a whole lot more minutes if things stand the way they are. And I think, to your point, Matt, I think Quattrin's stock rise, but even more so, I think Jackman Rogers' stock has just skyrocketed through the roof, because his impact this fantasy season was absolutely massive. Whether or not he's going to be able to repeat that remains to be seen. But the all arrows are pointing up.
Well, I mean, with more game time. Yeah, I see what you did there. All the arrows are pointing up. I hope you meant to do that.
We're on a roll today, aren't we?
Yeah,
we're absolutely on a roll.
You didn't mean that.
But no, more minutes, obviously, with a guy like that, it's just, I feel like, how does it not turn to more points? Like, the guy just seemed like a focal point to that front pack.
Absolutely. And then just to get your guys' perspective on Jackman Rogers, he finished the highest out of those 3 players. We mentioned Chad Go being in that 200, that 150 to 100 range. It was Andrew Quattrin within that 200 to 150 range. Jackman Rogers finished 75th on the season in MLR fantasy points, 33.8 on the year. Large part of that obviously being those 6 tries that we spoke about. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this kind of shakes out. But a shocking move. I really did not expect Quattrin to move on or be moved by the Toronto Arrows. He was obviously a very, very highly liked player within the organization, among players, among coaches. Also a fan favorite out of the bunch. And not to mention, Matt, you mentioned it, the community impact that he also had, being named the very first recipient of that S. Marcus Callaway Community Impact Award. So just obviously a stand-up guy that now moves on to the Utah Warriors. But hey, Vandy, in your defense and in your I guess Utah Warriors fanship, he can provide a lot of not only on the field impact, but hey, maybe in the locker room, maybe in the clubhouse, able to establish that culture that I think Utah Warriors are really looking to establish in order to take that next step in the league.
Well, and to add on to that, it's not like we traded something. It's not like we lost a player in replacement. Right. You know what I mean? Chad Go was retiring whether or not we got Quatrin. So to me, it's kind of like, there's no downside to it. I don't know how many international players we even had this year, even if we capped out. I'm not even sure. So, I mean, I'm not too worked up about that spot going away.
Yeah. And I mean, to Matt's point, I think Quatrin is worth a whole lot more than just one international slot.
Well, man, if you could bring in a locker room guy, that buys more than points. That buys more than score on the sheet, more than fantasy points. That's everything, right?
And hey, that was confirmed, by the way, by Toronto Arrow teammate Will Kelly, that Andrew Quatrin is worth more than an international slot. So it has to be true.
It has to be true. So let's talk about also, just as we move on, there's one thing that I wanted to mention. Brian Ray of America's Rugby News, he did say when the news came out about Quatrin getting traded to the Utah Warriors, he said, the rumor mill says this isn't the only Arrows player that's going to be off this offseason. So, hey, look for maybe some potential more moves that are going to happen within the Toronto Arrows organization to shake things up. I mean, they've been in the league since the beginning, essentially, and they have yet to really make a push for that title. I know they have had a high emphasis on developing homegrown Toronto talent and Canadian talent in the Toronto Arrows squad, but it does seem like, hey, maybe it's the shifting of the tide of a different mindset of having to obviously, pick up some other players in addition to growing that talent from the inside to really make an impact. I mean, you see what Rugby New York was able to do in terms of what they had to do to win a title, what the Giltinis had to do last year, and the players that were on their team that had to win a title. It's a nice dream to have to develop players, within Canada and really use that to your advantage. But I do think also with the way that the MLR is shaking up, you're going to need some of that overseas talent that just brings your club to a whole nother level. Whether or not you agree or disagree with that because of the way the MLR is and the emphasis of developing rugby here in North America, it is still something that is obviously clear with the players that come overseas and the impact that they have once they join these teams. So yeah, hey, look out for maybe some more moves to come, and maybe Toronto starts shifting to bring in some more of those guys, and instead of having such a heavily focus. Even though I do really like the idea of them growing that talent from the homegrown side. So yeah, we'll keep an eye out for that. Another roster move that we do need to talk about, though, not necessarily a roster move that is going to have MLR impact. It'll be interesting to see who replaces him, but I feel like I do have an idea of who's going to replace him. But Harrison Goddard, he's going overseas to play for the Waratahs. He has had experience playing Super Rugby before, and now he's joining a side to rejoin that competition overseas. He's going to compete in the 2023 Super Rugby Pacifics campaign for the New South Wales Waratahs. Should be interesting. I mean, it's cool to see guys moving on and using the MLR as a stepping stone to reignite their career overseas. But I do think that now the all eyes for the Giltinis is going to be on Taz Smith, him taking over the role of that starting 9 position with the Giltinis. But hey, it can't be said. Losing Harrison Goddard, who was obviously a huge impact for the Giltini side, he was named MVP for the club this past year. You're losing a very, very capable player at a very crucial position. We'll see whether or not Taz Smith can pick up the slack from that loss of Harrison Goddard.
Yeah, and that still isn't the biggest news coming out of the Giltini camp.
Well, we're getting to there, Matt. I love how you're alluding. You're so excited and jittery to get. You're
chomping at the
locked
bit,
and
man.
loaded to talk about a certain someone that we mentioned at the top of the show. But we're getting there. We're getting there,
baby.
Slowly but surely. Another bunch of roster moves here. Another trade, and I love to see these kind of trades. It happened a little bit of a while ago, but it kind of went under the radar. It happened back in mid-July, July 18th. But I guess we do need to mention it now. Nick Feeks, he's going over to Rugby New York for salary cap considerations in 2023. So that is what NOLA receives. Rugby New York gets the service rights to Nick Feeks. Nick Feeks is a guy that in our league had huge fantasy impact. I mean, you're talking about a back three player that finished in the top 50 of our fantasy MLR rankings, 47th, finishing with 44.6 fantasy points, scoring, I believe, 5 tries on the season. I know, I believe, and you can correct me guys if I'm wrong, but I do think that Nick Feeks does have center experience as well. I feel like I saw him slot in that position. I may be wrong on that, but nonetheless, though, they're bolstering. Rugby New York is bolstering up a back three side that is already considered to be one of the most dominant in the league.
I mean, when I saw this, I thought, what's happening to their back three? I mean, Nick Feeks does not deserve to not be in the starting 23 or in your line, right? He has to be in your 23. He's a good enough player to be there. Mm-hmm. So is somebody leaving? Are they preparing for somebody to leave? Because that's what it sounds like to me.
Well, Vandy and I were talking before the show, and Vandy was saying he's heard some things or some rumblings about maybe a departure.
Yeah, I heard. It's just fans talking, but I heard Nahe Milner-Scunner is probably not coming back.
Okay.
And Wasaki Nahalo is playing overseas right now, but he made a promise to somebody, like not publicly, but he said he'll be back.
Okay. Again, all
hearsay. It's pure.
Yeah. But to become the man with all the sources.
Hey, listen, as soon as I get my feelers out there, I just find people, man. They gravitate towards me.
To Matt's point, it's true. I mean, the thing that you do take away from this is that, hey, you can't just keep these are all players. Andrew Coe, Waisake Nahalo.
I mean, we know Andrew Coe isn't going anywhere.
We talked to him a few weeks ago. Yep. He said he's not
going anywhere.
Yep.
Nick Feeks,
he's got one more year, baby.
Yeah. So
I don't forget about old Ed Fidao.
Yeah, somebody's got to get out of there. I mean, anyways, I guess we'll find out.
If that's the case, though, talk about such a flex move.
Yeah,
right?
I was gonna say.
Nahe Milner-Scunner comes overseas, right, halfway through the season. I don't think he makes his first appearance until like a couple weeks left in the year, and then just wins a chip and says, you know what, that's good. I added that to my trophy cabinet. I got an MLR shield in my cabinet. All right, I'll go back over to New Zealand and.
Hey, you never know, man. Home. It's crazy, just kind of like, hey, I got a couple of weeks to play some rugby. Why not?
Yeah. And I mean, from a fantasy perspective, it just makes our lives that much harder because now we're trying to keep track of all these roster moves and it's just, who's going to be here, who's not going to be here. But hey, I guess it adds to a little fun of it. But yeah, good reading between the lines there, Matt. That was what I do. That was good. That was good. And then
I can't
read between these lines
on a good day.
These lines, buddy.
And then also, again, we reiterate it every single show, but there are also another plethora of roster moves that have happened. But the expectations are that these guys will be returning once they finish their playing overseas during this offseason. Matt, I know you had something to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if they're going to the Bunnings NPC Championship in New Zealand, expect them to be back in the lineups. Expect them to be back to the MLR unless they get called up to a provincial side. They get called up to the Blues, to the Crusaders, to the Chiefs, to the Highlanders, to the Hurricanes, etc. Unless they get called up, and which is ultimately probably one of the reasons why they're going back there to play, expect them back in the MLR. Expect them playing. I don't think you need to worry about those guys heading over to the Bunnings NPC Cup League. Guys going to Super Rugby, guys going to the Japan League, guys going to, the Premiership, etc., like that. Yeah, you can probably expect those guys to be out of the MLR. But hey, Bunnings NPC, no worries. Expect to draft them. Get ready to go.
Yeah, so good point there. And also, if anyone is already doing their draft prep to keep up with Matt and Vandy, who have already, I know, have started their draft prep. They got the sticky notes on the walls. They got all that going. It's just something to keep an eye out for to kind of foresee who will and will not be available for next season. Obviously, there's still a lot of time until the next draft, the next fantasy draft, I should say. Just something to keep an eye on. Very, very good point. Another good point there, Matt. You're on a roll here. So I think about does it for the player moves over the past week or so. thank you again to at MLR Stats and at Jam Delay on Twitter, MLR Stats on Instagram for keeping this up to date. He does a weekly post. He's been a huge contributor in our community as well, joining our Discord channel. So thanks to him for keeping up. We definitely resort to him for all the latest roster moves just to kind of get it in a condensed format. It's great. And hey, we're all for more MLR content. Mm-hmm. So I love it. Absolutely love it. So we talked about kind of the roster moves on a player standpoint, but something I want to touch on, not necessarily the move that happened this past week, but kind of allows me to talk about a move that I spoke about last episode that I want to get Vandy your opinion on and Matt your opinion on as well. The Dallas Jackals have named their team president, and that is listed as Steve Violetta. And he's had a lot of experience from a front office standpoint. He's been on 5 different NHL teams: the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Ottawa Senators, the Nashville Predators, the Detroit Red Wings, and the Edmonton Oilers. He's been with the San Diego Padres as well. So obviously a lot of executive experience, but that's not necessarily the move that I want to talk about, because obviously he will be making big decisions from a business standpoint, and he might have a say on the roster construction as well. But the guy that we know is going to have a big impact on roster construction is a guy that I mentioned last week. He was it was announced on July 21st. They named Santiago Sodini as the general manager for the Dallas Jackals. And why that's so important and why I want to bring it up again is because we talked about the old boy New Zealand All Blacks. Who are they?
Rugby New York.
We talked about the Sabre Box.
Yeah.
And we talked about the LA Giltinis, who is essentially an Australian side, right?
Yeah. No longer though.
Well, no. I mean, we'll see, man.
Oh, Goddard's gone. Hold on. Goddard's gone. Ashley Cooper's gone.
True.
You know, they're losing their touch.
Okay.
Their touch.
Their Australian flair. It's true.
They're losing their Australian flair. They're losing their drinks. Anyways, go on. Sorry.
So the point of this is that Santiago Sodini, or also known as Santi, I think we call him Santi on the show, right? It's cool. We can do that.
Yeah,
he is actually a native of Argentina. And we know how big of a push or big of a improvement Argentina has made over the past decade when it comes to the development of rugby. Their integration into the Rugby Championship, which, by the way, starts this weekend. So which will be fun to watch. But, hey, maybe there's now a pipeline for bringing in South American players, Argentinian players, into the MLR, and maybe that's going to be through the Dallas Jackals. Thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen a lot of Uruguayans. Lots of Uruguayans go up to the Arrows. For some reason, they love Toronto. But yeah, no, I think if we can get some Argentinian young talent, guys who maybe don't make the Jaguares, come up and play in the MLR. Argentina guys are absolute ecstatic to watch. Love watching those guys play.
And why do you say that?
Well, look, they've got the boot, right? They've got the footwork. They've got speed. They're even physical sometimes. So they just really a really fun energy to the game. I've always loved watching Argentina play, especially against sides that are a bit above their level. So it's always been a good time to watch them. And yeah, seeing more of those boys in the league would always make the league a bit more fun to watch.
And obviously the Dallas Jackals coming off of a season that is not necessarily one that they're, proud of, yeah, for a lack of better terms. But they are going to be starting to try to make steps forward into establishing that culture. We got to remember, this is a team that just finished their inaugural season. Yeah. It's very, very tough for an expansion team to make any big waves in their first season. Trying to establish that, I think the important part for them is not necessarily the success on the field, but we alluded to it earlier in this episode about the importance of establishing culture and establishing the clubhouse and all that stuff.
And so, safety. Safety.
Stay away from high rises.
We can't be
any over 6-foot platforms.
Hey, look, I was also excited to watch about this because you know what I heard in the rumor mill too is that new president, along with all those sport accolades, I heard he's also a little bit of an architectural engineer. So he's going to make sure he's going to run the safety inspections on all the catwalks,
on that.
Right? All the catwalks. And he's going to make sure that these boys do not ever fall from a high place again.
nowhere in this press release does it say that he
Oh
was
no,
If
it's not in
he's
the
an
press
architect,
release.
You're spewing crap here. This is not good.
It's not in the
bueno.
press release. Look, it's not in the press release. It's a hidden fun fact about I forget his name, but that's a hidden fun fact about Mr. Violetta. Okay,
Steve Violetta.
Steve Violetta. Okay.
All right.
It may not be true,
Whatever.
but it's a fun fact.
Well, we'll see. Again, if they can start with, I guess, Violetta and then down with now Sodini to go and establish this culture, bring in high-level Argentinian talent and pipeline that through the Dallas Jackals because they have that kind of source, hey, it's only going to help the Dallas Jackals, and maybe we'll see a big step forward, depending, obviously, on the signings that are made, under the management of Santiago Sodini, where it remains to be seen, because I don't believe I've seen any new signings for him or under his tutelage as of yet. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of moves he does make going forward, and we'll see whether or not they can do something that, hey, the Houston SaberCats were able to do last season, turn things around in a pretty quick pace. We can't really expect that.
And let's not forget that Andrew Coe, the MLR champion, has told us that we should expect big things from the Dallas Jackals this next year. So, does that mean that it's basically true?
Yeah, hey, we'll see. We will see, and we don't know. But hey, I guess you're rooting for them, eh, Matt?
Yeah, you're a Dallas Jackals fan now, eh?
I'm just a man of safety. Safety never takes a holiday,
right.
Okay? Safety never takes a holiday, right? Vandy, you know this, right? There's no holiday for safety, and I just want the boys to be safe. I want the boys to be, scared of heights so that they never walk above 7 feet off the ground again.
All right.
Without a lanyard. Without a lanyard.
I want to now move on to the topic that I actually want to hear you start spewing about.
Good.
Yeah,
I'm going to
wasting all your energy.
I'm
never short of energy there.
We've gone through the player roster moves. We've gone through now the front office moves. It's now start to talk about some
lawyer moves,
financial
the
business moves.
Financial, baby.
Everyone in the MLR or who watches the MLR or in the MLR community is quite aware of the owner that is Adam Gilchrist, who owns both the Austin Gilgronis and the LA Giltinis, who happens to be the worst two names of all time that I hope they change after all this news comes out. But that's besides the fact.
They're going to keep it in honor of him.
That'd be a horrible mistake. But that being said, Gilchrist has stepped down as the F45 chair and CEO, which is his company, and has stepped down from that. He's also, I believe, the rumors are that the F45 will be filing for bankruptcy relatively soon. In addition to that, he has, Vandy, you mentioned it to me earlier before the show that we started recording. He has also sold his $14 million beach house. It is currently on auction. Hey, maybe we can
put it a bit. Don't worry.
Maybe get a fantasy Ruckers house and we can put some of that.
We're going to put a streaming house.
First of all, this is turning into the Fantasy Ruckers Wall Street Journal. That's us. Welcome to the show, everybody. Two, I didn't hear any selling off of any breweries. Okay? And this is what I think, okay? This is what I think. Look, he's had I don't know how old he is, but he's had a life crisis. All right. This is his story. He's had a life crisis. He wants to dive his heart and soul and passion into the hops and brouhahas and the canisters of beer and the pints and the kegs and then also the martinis. And he wants to dive in his heart and passion and soul into making Giltinis, Gillies, and Gilgronis.
Honestly,
okay.
The only thing out of all of that, you talk about this passion, the only thing out of all of that I've seen are the Gillies beers. I have yet to see a Giltini, and I have yet to see a Gilgroni.
It's because he hasn't dived his passion into it yet, and now he gets the chance, Ryan. He's given up fitness.
Well, you would have
He's given up rugby. He's diving into the brews and the martinis.
And he's going to start making pretzels. It's just a great mix.
The Gil pretzel.
And he's going to call it Gitzels.
I'm just the journalism major here. Matt, you're the business guy. You have the business degree, so I'm not quite sure what kind of the whole business tactics here. But I would have thought that you would have had the Giltinis and the Gilgronis in place when these teams started, so that you can sell those drinks at those games and matches. But
I can't buy heart. There's no money that can buy heart. And he's got his heart and soul into those Giltinis and those Gillies.
You need about $400,000 in the black market, but I'll buy you a heart.
Hey, he just sold his $14 million mansion. He can buy one easy.
It's up for auction. We still have a chance, boys. We still have a chance to raise the $14 million.
You think it's branded?
Matt, I got a story for you.
You think it's called the Gill Mansion or something like that, and that's how they're broadcasting it?
Yeah, he's got a Gill cave underneath. Like, so listen, now, Matt, I got a quick story for him.
All right.
You know what, Matt? He might be liquidating, or he might just be putting all his money into one avenue. You could be right. He could be making the best beer you've ever had.
Yeah.
But this one time, many moons ago, when I was living with Ryan, the government came a knocking, just like they're doing at Gilchrist, and they wanted some money. And I had to liquidate a bike. Okay. And you know what? Sometimes you liquidate things to pay off the big man. Okay. So he might be invested into beer and stuff, but I think he's paying off some big people, buddy.
Some big debts.
You know what?
Well, yeah.
And he has a $14 million bike, dog.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of cheddar.
So, okay, well, with that all being said, now that we got that all out of our system, in all seriousness, this does have major MLR implications because we are starting to get an idea. Matt, stop.
Well, sure.
Well, no, I think last thing that we need to say before we move on to the MLR stuff is that in all serious, P's and P's to the family members that I know that work at F45 and anybody else who works at F45 or goes to the gym at F45 because look, that's an F44 now. It's gone.
Do you actually know people that work at F45?
No.
And you know people that work at F45.
All right. Well,
we all know somebody who goes to an F45 these days. Okay.
There you go. Well,
and they're just losing that part of their day. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Gilchrist had to be so irresponsible and cause that burden on your life. Now let's go to the MLR stuff.
Let's go with the MLR stuff now. So let's talk about the implications this had, because obviously, all jokes aside, this does give us some sort of clarity, despite absolutely having no clarity at all. But it gives us some sort of direction in terms of how this situation is sort of panning out. Now, again, none of this is verified. All of this is, implying or inferring, I guess, what we think is going to happen based on these moves. Now we're seeing Gilchrist stepping down from that CEO position. We're seeing Gilchrist putting his $14 million freshwater mansion up for auction. You can start to piece the puzzle together and figure out what the heck is going on.
This is why I brought up my bike story.
Chances
are he's paying off somebody.
In addition to all this stuff, we have also, and we mentioned it earlier earlier during the season, about the rumors of the Austin Gilgronis being sold. And it does appear off of some of the talkings that have been happening. Again, nothing officially verified.
Allegedly.
It does seem that the Gilgronis will be moving on, and it seems like the ownership group will be taking over the team. Allegedly.
I'm sure keep saying that for the rest of the segment.
Right, because all of this is allegedly, right? Because we have no clarity still with this whole situation. And the fact that we still haven't talked about the whole playoff situation, and we still haven't got a message from the MLR without that all broken down. Regardless, just all that, all the lack of clarity that we've been having with this. But nonetheless, there is the inklings and the ownership group that it does seem like that they will be moving on in the near future. There has been also talks about that the ownership group that will be taking over does not see that Austin is going to be their home in the future. Again, allegedly. We don't know if that's the case. But we'll see whether or not that happens. We don't know what's going to happen with the Giltinis. We still don't know a lot, but we know some things, and things are starting to make progress.
Listen,
this is what I know.
You don't know nothing.
No. This is what I know. If
nothing.
The LA Giltinis go from the LA Giltinis to something so unoriginal, like LARFC.
The LA Jabronis.
Yeah, it's gonna be Adam Gilchrist's second identity. Adam DeBrocrest.
Yeah.
That's what it's gonna be. It's just gonna be him with a mustache on, owning the LA Jabronis again.
You might be right.
What do you know, Vandy?
I don't. Hey, listen. I just know some high valued people. Okay.
You know, some high valued people.
Yeah, we get together every once in a while. We talk. We chat.
Okay. Yeah,
but nonetheless, all that we do know is if Gilchrist does decide to move on from this teams and to sell them off, I think we can be confident and say that we no longer have to deal with the Giltini's name and the Gilgroni's name. Hopefully, because again, we mentioned it all since we started this show. Just not a great name. Let's get a better franchise name in there. Are you really?
I'm gonna miss it. I'm actually gonna accidentally call them those names on this show, even after they're not like that, just to make sure that the legacy of Mr. Gilchrist lives on.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if that's a legacy you want to allow to live on. But hey, nonetheless, again, all of this is Vandy.
Hearsay. Allegedly.
Allegedly, right.
Sorry, I was watching the Amber Heard trial. Allegedly.
We're going to see what more comes out of this. Again, all these steps point in the direction that there is going to be some pretty big moves with these two franchises moving forward. Nothing official yet, but we'll definitely keep an eye out for that. But
and if Mr. Gilchrist and you're watching and you're pouring your heart and soul into drink making, being an awesome beer maker,
yeah, sponsor me then.
And sponsor us, because we're rooting for you, man. We're rooting for you. We may not root for you as an MLR owner, but we're rooting for you as a brewmaster.
Right. You watch these shows back. Matt's the one who said all this stuff. All I said is I want to sponsor.
All the good stuff,
allegedly. Too. That's all I say, allegedly.
All right. Well, a perfect segue. Talk about another perfect segue. We have an Ask TFR show question. It has something to do with this. With the whole rumors, allegedly, that there is the potential that this new ownership group, allegedly, that will be taking over the Austin to be named Gilgronis, that they don't want to keep them in Austin. Where could they possibly go? And that led to the question as we get towards the tail end of the show. Where the heck will they put them? Because when I'm thinking about cities, I mean, Austin is a pretty dang good city to have a new franchise, an up-and-coming city, a lot of people moving there, good weather all season long that you can play a lot of rugby. Austin seems like a pretty dang good place to me. But nonetheless, if this ownership group does move the Austin Gilgronis, where could they go? Where could they go? And that leads us to the Ask TFR show question. The TFR show question for today is, if there is a movement of a team, or even if there's an expansion, because we know that is the goal of the MLR, is to try to expand 2 more teams. Whether or not you do or do not agree with that, that's a whole different story. But if they are to expand or if they are to move a team, what city would be the best city to consider for that team? So Matt, I'll start with you, man. Where do you think the MLR should move to if and when the Gilgronis move to a different city, or if they expand the league to 14 teams?
Look, Cole brought it up 3 weeks ago. All right, I went to school there. I played rugby there. I know that this city that I'm about to name, is the heart and soul of rugby in Canada.
I thought you were going to say Canada. Period.
Yes, Canada.
He's a little bit smarter than that.
Yeah,
this city is Vancouver. They need a team in Vancouver. You know why? Because look, yes, the Arrows are Canada's team right now, but people on the West Coast love rugby and they have nobody to root for. They don't want to cross the border and cheer for the Seattle Seawolves. They're Canadian. They don't want to cheer for an American team. Vancouver needs its team. It's got a pool of talent there. It's got a bunch of fans there that are willing to watch. There's Vancouver Sevens there, so you know that there's interest. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, look, you want to grow domestic talent, Vancouver is where you do it. And you grow domestic talent there, and that's how you do it. You got the fans, you got the players, you got the interest. Let's get to it. All right, new ownership group, whoever you are.
And the Rugby Canada, what is it? The headquarters is also there, I believe in.
I mean, they're in Langford on the island, but look, Vancouver's close enough. Vancouver's the big city.
Hey,
you can't call it Victoria.
Right. Langford is closer to Vancouver than it is to Toronto, so that is a step in the right direction.
What's the team called if it goes to Vancouver?
Vancouver Blizzard. No, Vancouver.
It would have to be something.
Gilgronies.
Vancouver violinists.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting one. I mean, you would have thought
Guiltinis.
I would like Seawolves is a damn good name, and I feel like that's something that the that West Coast, especially the Vancouver area, kind of with the orcas and all that stuff. I feel like that's Vancouver kind of embraces that, but obviously they can't take that now with Seattle
Vancouver
claiming that name. So, we'll see whether or not, but that is an interesting thought to be had. Hopefully, yeah. I mean, it's got to be better than what the former name of the franchise was with the Austin Gilgronies. But Vandy, before I get to your answer, I want to give my answer. I think great. It's not a Canadian town, but I got to say Las Vegas. Las Vegas would be an awesome place to start a franchise. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of competing factors because you do have, obviously, the Raiders that just recently moved there in the NFL. You got the Las Vegas Golden Knights that are established there, too. But, hey, there's a reason why they're moving those franchises over there. Hey, I'm sure a lot of you listeners, I'm sure a lot of you viewers have heard, there's a little thing called sports betting right now that is absolutely taking off. And we have heard about inklings and rumors about the MLR partnering and getting more embedded and more established within that sports betting scene. That might be part of the reason why we haven't had as robust MLR stats available to us, because they're holding that close to vest in order to provide that to investors and provide that to the sports betting scene. I don't know. That's also a thing that is allegedly. But nonetheless, if you got to Las Vegas, you're in the hub of sports betting. People love sports there. I don't know, man. You got the Las Vegas 7 scene there as well, another location, and that's a big popular one too as well. In the past, you
care about player well-being, right? You don't care, right? You want them to get boozed up. You want them to go to the casinos. You want them to fall off the catwalks in Las Vegas. All right. You want them to go up and down the street and
show up in the middle of the night.
I am assuming that the rugby players have the self-control to not have Las Vegas absolutely destroy them. But hey, you got a good point. Hey, destroy them.
It was more self-control.
Yeah, self-control.
You know,
look, we couldn't keep the players away.
Athletes, Ryan, we don't have any.
Well, hey, the Raiders have been able to do it. The Golden Knights have been able to be okay.
Talk about discipline.
So I don't know. I think Las Vegas.
Post game drinks with the opponent at the Caesars Palace.
Oh yeah,
is that what it's gonna be?
Yeah, 100%. They'll put down.
I'm for it. I like it though. I think there's lots of fans.
You know what? I could see that though. You know what? I'd try out rugby. I'd go right after my arrows practice.
Like think about people like
right after I'm
done with the arrows and just hop on a Pearson.
You'd go right after your all-nighter at the casino. That's what you'd do.
Oh, boys, the bender would be terrible.
All right, last but not least, Vandy, where would you put an MLR team?
You guys say it like you already know. Like you got it leaked too. Just let me check with my boy here. Yeah, okay, I can tell you. So this is 100% happening.
Don't say some ridiculous city here. If you say a ridiculous city, I'm just gonna lose it.
Like what would be ridiculous?
You know, whatever you say, really.
Like Vancouver or something crazy.
Like something stupid.
It's my boy Patrick Mahomes.
Oh,
paid the $500 million man, bought the team. It's moving to Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, and you know what? He even leaked the name for me. Missouri Mahomies.
Missouri Mahomies. I don't know if that's even worse than freaking the Gilgronies and the freaking.
I'm in, baby. I'm invested. I sold my house.
Honestly, obviously, that is something that hasn't happened. But
facts.
I mean, think about New England Free Jacks. I mean, you have ownership groups that have ties to the NFL. You have Patrick Chung and you have Nate Ebner, right? It's not a far stretch.
You're right. Mahomes did a behind the back rugby pass.
Yeah, that's right. You've seen that too, eh? That was filthy.
Last week. So that means that he must be interested in buying a team. He knows.
He hit me up, said, "Hey boys, the podcast is rolling. You guys are really blowing up the scene.
The boys podcast is rolling.
League.
You guys are blowing up the scene. We're gonna suck this year." Oh, okay, that's the fourth one.
Just wait till Patrick buys the team.
But nonetheless, I wouldn't be surprised as on a serious note, I wouldn't be surprised in the future as the MLR starts to look for more ownership groups in order to expand to more teams, that, hey, maybe there are some already established athletes that are making a whole bunch of money. And in the grand, I'm not saying that it doesn't cost a lot to buy an MLR team, but in the grand scheme of things, like you compare it to buying like an MLB team or an NFL team or an NBA team, it's chump change. It's a chump change to buy an MLR team. So I wouldn't be established like a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who's literally has a $500 million contract. Say, hey, why not own? He already is. Isn't he part of the Kansas City Royals ownership group?
He's like a majority stock owner in the Royals.
Right. So I mean, if he can afford that, he can definitely afford buying an MLR team. But
if he buys the team, you got to fly down to Tillsonburg and kiss me on my mouth.
I don't know if you want that, Daddy. I don't know if you want that.
Come get some of this Canadian monkeypox.
Hey, well,
you don't want the American one.
Yeah.
We're in a state of emergency over here. You don't want this one.
On a serious note, it's not the necessarily Patrick Mahomes, but in the grand idea of what Vandy is pointing towards here, there could be an athlete that invests into a team, into an MLR team, and establishes that team in somewhere brand new. So yeah, I know Vandy says Kansas City, Missouri, but hey, it might be one of
Utah
these.
so fast to go cheer for this Kansas City team if they came. You would
ditch it almost as fast as he ditched them for San Diego Legion, right?
Hey, you guys gave me like 4 outs this season. I took none of them.
That is true. That's fair enough.
You know what? I want smoke. If when Patrick Mahomes buys the team, I'm still gonna be a Utah fan.
Yeah, okay.
Hey. Well, I'll see when it happens, man. I don't know if I believe that, but
I don't believe it either. But
I think we're all cut up, boys. I think we got all the news out of the way after finally getting back together after the past couple episodes.
We got the segues out of the way. We got the jokes out of the way, and you know what else we got out of the way? But it's never going. The toxicity, baby. That's what we got in, and we're never getting out.
Matt's got that in spades, baby.
That is very much true. But yeah, you can expect definitely a lot more fantasy rugby, fantasy MLR content going forward throughout the whole offseason. Finally caught up with all the crazy news. I'm sure there's going to be even more crazier news for next episode. We're going to continue with the fantasy deep dives. We're going to look back at this past season, look at the numbers, see how that's going to help you for your 2023 fantasy MLR season. And hey, maybe we'll have a couple more special guests on the show as well. Hopefully we can line that up and give you guys a little bit of a treat and hear what some of the actual players in the league think about the existence and the opportunity of making fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. But hey, with that being said, you guys have anything else to say to the people as we wrap up the show?
If you're looking for a one-stop shop for all things Gilchrist, you know where to find them.
That's a pretty good slogan, man. They should hire for the marketing.
If you're looking for a guy to promote your beer day in and day out, you got him.
You guys are selling out.
Worse than Don Cherry in stock market, baby.
But hey, all I got to say is, hey, it's great to have all of us back on the show again. It's been a couple weeks.
Great to be back.
But it's good. Great to be back. Well, hey, summer's in full swing. Off season is in full swing, but that doesn't mean that the fantasy rugby content is going to slow down at all. We still got that for you, and you can find that right here on the Fantasy Ruckers. For Matt Yee, for Devin Vandy Vanderpool, I'm Ryan Yee. We'll be back next week for more on the Fantasy Ruckers show.
Sponsor us, Gillies.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.